The UEFA Champions League is approaching its yet another season, and so it's time to predict how Europe's elite competition will turn out. But I have decided to step the game up. We will not only predict who goes where in the knockouts, but we'll also predict the league stage table, the qualifiers, and we'll do it in all of the UEFA competitions. We're starting from the very first qualifying round of the Champions League. The first and second qualifying rounds have already been drawn, so what you're seeing in this massive Excel file is the list of factually accurate pairings of teams that will be playing in the first and second qualifying round of all the Champions League, as you can see. Also got the Europa League sorted out, and as well the Conference League. Now, I will start with the Champions League itself, because with all the drop downs, I want to make it easy first, then we'll go and see what happens down below. And one of the Europe's elite is Cameroon versus Žalgiris Vilnius from Lithuania. And Žalgiris already has a history of going to the Conference League group stage. That was in 22-23 season. That was a massive event for them, and I think, despite the fact they did not qualify either in 24 or 25, I still think they're going to get past this first qualifying round, and it will be 2 victories. Milsami versus Kuopio, and Milsami is an underdog story in Moldova. They've won the championship quite surprisingly. There will be a draw between them, but overall, Kuopio goes through. Then we've got Shkendia and Danube Saints. Well, all I can say is that Danube Saints have already qualified last season, so they're probably going to do it again, at least in the first qualifying round. Malmo versus Iberia, and now there's a massive story regarding Swedish football. They've had 3 different teams in European League stage last season, and one of them, Djurgården, even made it to the Conference League semi-final. I think beating a Georgian side should be quite an easy task for them, 2 comfortable wins. The Baltic Derby, I'd say. Levadia versus Riga. RFS Riga already qualified to the Europa League last season. It will be a tight one, but I think Riga is going to go through the first qualifying round into the second. Levadia drops down to the Conference League. Then we've got Differdonj and Drita, which I quite frankly know nothing about. We've got Viking Kurgota and Lincoln Red Teams, and also my knowledge about these 2 leagues is pretty minimal, so I'd say Faroe Island, because I remember the wild ride of Koek Klaksvik in the Conference League in 2023. Egnatia Breidablik. Now this one is quite an interesting game from the Polish perspective. The winner will play Lech Poznań, and I think it's just going to be Breidablik. Shelburne and Linfield, we've got the Irish derby, I'd say. And I'm quite inclined to say it could be Linfield, but it will be the extra time, even the penalties. It will be on penalties, basically. Unlike FCSB Bucharest versus Interclub Descaldes, Virtus and Zrinjski Mostar, I think it will be the similar fate. Kairat and Olimpia Ljubljana. Now this could be tighter, but we remember Olimpia Ljubljana made it to the Conference League knockouts last season on a regular basis in Europe right now. So the Slovenian champions, I think they will go through. Noah Yerevan, who went to the Conference League stage last season, of course, later demolished by Chelsea 8-0, versus the powerhouse of the Montenegrin football, Budućnost Podgorica. It will be tight, but the momentum from last season will get Yerevan through. And the last pairing is, with pretty much no discussion, Dynamo Minsk played Legia Warsaw last season, and we've seen there is a difference of levels. Ludogorets Razgrad, of course, the powerhouse of Bulgarian football. Easy 2 victories. And I think this is how the first qualifying round turns out. So we're going to the second. These are also the pairings that have already been drawn. Riga versus Malmö in the second qualifying round. It will be tight, but I'm still giving it to Malmö. I'm giving it to Dynamo Kiev against Žalgiris Vilnius. I quite frankly know very little about those 2 leagues. And I'm just going to give it to Paphos. Viking Kurgota, Crvena Zvezda, quite an easy story here, although not so much, I'd say. I would say it would be tighter. Crvena Zvezda, though, they're the powerhouse of Serbian football and they're dominating it. I might be wrong here, but I remember them going invincible, and they had a title guaranteed with like 7 games to go. Barely 4,000 people attended their title celebration game. They will go through, but it will be tight. So what about Noah Yerevan and Ferencváros? It feels like a Ferencváros would win. Now it's Breidablik versus Lech Poznań. Lech Poznań missed out on Europe last season, but they've won the championship in 2025. And I think, despite their history with Icelandic teams, they should be going through quite comfortably. I'd say Leg at home will be to some sort of Breidablik's advantage, but in Poznań they should sort it out really. Just got the title from Dinamo Zagreb. Ludogorets, of course, we know the story. Rijeka, they broke the domination, but they're going to pay the price in narrowly being knocked out by Ludogorets from the Champions League in the first time of asking. Shouldn't be the case for Bucharest, though. Now it's Zrinjski Mostar versus Slovan Bratislava. Zrinjski made it to the Conference League a couple of times, but they didn't do so last year. It's Boras Banja Luka who even got to the knockouts. Now it's Zrinjski who won the league. They'll be playing the Slovak champions who made it to the Champions League. That was big story for the Slovak football, really. That exact reason, the Champions League run from last year, plenty of money as well. Slovan will win both games, but it will be tight. Linfield Karabakh. Karabakh has a reputation of knocking Polish teams out and other teams out. They've even been to the Champions League in 2018, so I'd say 2 comfortable wins. Kuopio and Ljubljana will be much tighter though. And I think it will be 2 draws. And I think this one might even finish on penalties, really. I'm giving it to Ljubljana, though. And now we're having a League Cup. Brann, Salzburg, Servette, Viktoria Pilsen, Panathinaikos, and Rangers. Salzburg is a Champions League team really right now, so they should be dealing with Brann. Same as Viktoria Pilsen. Bit of European experience will help them. And in terms of Panathinaikos and Rangers, I think this might be the tightest of these 3. And I'm actually going to give it to go to penalties as well, in advantage of, I want to say, Rangers. And when I look at the Scottish League, Celtic has absolutely dominated that one, I remember. Rangers was way behind, but way ahead of the rest. So I think this should get Rangers to at least the Europa League, but nothing more, really. And now we're jumping to the 3rd qualifying round. And as you can see, I have to make the draw. So everything is all done. We've got the draw. And it got us quite interesting pairings, I must admit, really. So going on with Bucharest versus Ferencváros, FCSB made it to the round of 16, got battered by Lyon, who are now relegated in real life. I don't want to say there's a clear favorite here, really, though. And I'm giving it to Ferencváros, in my opinion. Ludogorets Razgrad versus Karabakh. Now, I think this one will be Ludogorets' win. So we're moving on to Malmö versus Crvena Zvezda. As I told you, Serbian football really is on the decline, although Crvena Zvezda is a powerhouse. Partizan could be doing quite well, although they've lost all 3 aggregates last season in Europe. In the Champions League, then the Europa League, and then the Conference League, and they got dropped out even before the league stage. A draw, and then on penalties, it will be Malmö. Dynamo Kiev versus Slovan Bratislava now. Dynamo made it to the Europa League, but almost finished rock bottom. Slovan Bratislava finished rock bottom in the Champions League with 0 points. I don't know which one is more valuable, really. And I would like to say Slovan Bratislava will win this tie if it happens. Olimpia Ljubljana versus Paphos. I still think it will be an equal game with yet another extra time. And I'm saying whoever plays the second game at home wins. So in this particular tie, I'm saying Paphos, but if Olimpia plays at home for some reason, whoever plays the second leg at home wins. And now we've got Lech Poznań versus FC Copenhagen. We've already got a sample of what can happen between the Polish champions and Copenhagen. Raków Częstochowa played them in the 23-24 season. Copenhagen later went on to the Champions League round of 16. Raków got knocked out in the group stage. Lech and Copenhagen, though. It could be tighter, but what I'm saying right now, I'm very cautiously saying Lech will not go through Copenhagen, although they can salvage a draw or potentially even a win, either at home or away. Like in one of the games, they will get something for the coefficients. Now we're going to the league path. Salzburg versus Feyenoord. Feyenoord made it to the knockout. Salzburg got grouped last season. And I'm going to keep it at the same. It will be tight, though. Nice versus Club Brugge. And I'm going to go with an upset here. I'm thinking Brugge, who made it to the knockouts last season, are going to actually go through Nice if this pairing goes through. Belgian football really is on the rise in the coefficients, at least. It was always that reputable league with plenty of young talent, for example. And now they could really go on to maybe even damage the top 7. Viktoria Pilsen, Benfica. Now Czechia has also had a massive season last year. 4 teams in the league stage, any kind. 1 in the Champions League, 1 in the Europa League, 2 in the Conference League. At home they will win. In the aggregate, I don't think so. Fenerbahce versus Rangers. Now it's going to be a tight pairing. Fenerbahce was closer to Galatasaray than Rangers was to Celtic. Fenerbahce may go through. We've got the Champions League playoff itself, the most important game of the season for some of those teams, because decides if they will get 20 million euros of bonus. If my calculations in terms of how the teams are seeded is not correct, then you can let me know in the comment. I'll pin the comment that best explains it. UEFA coefficient rankings, though, it seems pretty simple. It's actually very complicated. Now it's time for the final qualifying round. What I'm seeing is Paphos versus Copenhagen. Now, based on the history of European competitions, I'm giving this one clearly to Copenhagen. Though both teams got knocked out in the round of 16 in the Conference League last season, Copenhagen has that Champions League history. And I've got Ludogorets versus Malmö. Though the Bulgarian league is not really fulfilling its potential, Ludogorets is its powerhouse, and I think they should be going to the Champions League stage over Malmö. Basel versus Bodo Glimt is a very interesting pairing, though. Basel finally won the title. I remember in 2023-24 season, they were in genuine danger of relegation. And now Bodo Glimt, now considered one of the best run clubs in Europe and even the entire world. And this is a very interesting matchup, I want to say. Bodo Glimt made the Europa League semi-finals last season. That was an underdog story and a half. And I'm actually going to give this Champions League stage slot to them, because this is just yet another milestone. If they keep doing what they're doing, I think they might be, in 3 to 5 years time, they might get into the Champions League knockouts. They're not there yet, but they will be in the league stage, and this will be quite a huge milestone for them. Sturm Graz versus Ferencváros. Sturm Graz just got the title away from Salzburg, and I think they're also going to claim the league stage slot. It will be tight though. Slovan Bratislava versus Celtic Glasgow. We remember how Slovan Bratislava made the run in the Champions League qualifiers last season. Comeback against Midtjylland was absolute cinema with just long shots, old school football really. However, in the very first match day, they met Celtic and they got absolutely demolished. I think the Slovan side will score a goal, but that will quite literally be it. They will not be thrashed, but they will definitely be defeated. Now it's Fenerbahce versus Benfica in the league path, and I think Benfica will go through. And Feyenoord versus Bruges, very interesting matchup it would be. And as a bit of a hot take, I'm actually giving the slot to Belgium, but on penalties. Copenhagen, Ludogorets, Bodo Glimt, Sturm Graz, Celtic, Benfica and Club Brugge are going to the Champions League stage from the final qualifying round. And that's what I think will happen. And now, welcome to the Europa League. They're still going to knock out Tampere and Ilves. That should be an easy task. Same for Sheriff Tiraspol. Keikin versus Trnava. I'd like to say it will be a bit tighter. Sabah FC. They finished 5th in the league, but they've won the cup. Still don't think it's going to be enough for Celje. I mean, they will salvage something at home, but in Slovenia, I don't see the future being so bright. So what about October versus Legia Warsaw? It's Legia, and this pretty much settles the result for me. Now we've got Levski Sofia versus Kapel Beersheva. I think this will be a tight one on penalties. Levski goes through. Larnaca versus Partizan. Though Partizan made a disaster of a European performance last season, Larnaca is just going to be knocked out by Partizan. And Paxi and Cluj, I'm giving this one to them. Second round though. Hibernian versus Lugano. Quick pause here. After completing this round of games, I realized the opponents of Lugano should be Cluj from Romania and not Hibernian. This doesn't change the result though. Lugano is still winning this aggregate. Celje versus Partizan. Still think it's Celje's win. Levski versus SC Braga. That should be clear for the Portuguese team. Now we've got Baník versus Legia, and this one could actually be exciting. Both teams were in the Conference League. No, Baník lost on penalties to Copenhagen. Mlada Bolesław lost in the Conference League. Are stepping up their game. They finished third in the league quite comfortably, I want to say. Now I still think Legia has that European edge. They've gone to the Conference League quarterfinal despite a very mediocre league season. It might even go down to the penalty shootout. It will be Legia's win, but it will be very, very, very tight. Haken versus Anderlecht. Now I think Anderlecht might win this one. Sheriff Tiraspol and Utrecht. I don't want to say Tiraspol will win. They will get knocked out, but it will be very tight as well. Hibernian versus Midtjylland should be a little bit clearer. And Shakhtar Donetsk versus Besiktas. As well, I'm saying Besiktas' win. So starting with the Champions path in the Europa League, third qualifying round. Žalgiris versus the New Saints. The New Saints made it last year to Europe. They shared the money they've got from going this far to the rest of the clubs in the league. I'd say it will go down to the extra time with the New Saints winning this one. Lenfil versus Zrinski Mostar should be a bit easier for the Bosniak side. Vrikin Gurgota versus Riga. That should be a win for Riga as well. Breidablik versus Tel Aviv. I want to say they will cause an upset at home, but away it will be again very clear. Now Yerevan versus Rijeka, that shouldn't really be a discussion. And Drita versus Kuopio should be a tighter one, but with Kuopio's win. Wolfsberger AC. Only thing I remember about them is themselves going to Europe in 2020-21 season. Legia will actually win this one, albeit not as dramatic. Servette versus PAOK Saloniki may go dramatic, and I think this will go down as PAOK's win. Bran versus Braga should be a bit clearer. Lugano versus Midtjylland. I think Midtjylland will do it actually. Utrecht versus Celje should be a bit clearer though, and the Dutch side should win. Panathinaikos, Besiktas. It will be very tight. I'm saying Besiktas wins it though. Fredrikstad versus Anderlecht should be actually a bit clearer though. And now it's time for the fourth qualifying round. Aberdeen didn't even finish third in the league, though it shouldn't be a deciding edge against Saloniki. I think this will go down to the penalty shootout and PAOK wins this one. I think Braga's European experience will prevail in this one. Rijeka versus Karabakh should be easy though for them. Sigma Omuniec versus Besiktas. This one will go in favor of the Turkish side. It should be even cleaner in Bern versus Riga though. And Samsunspor versus Lech Poznań. I just don't know what will happen here really. I know nothing about Samsunspor. So let me check the squad and see if I know anyone. Well, Lubomir Szatka is the first player I recognize. He played in Lech Poznań in around 2022. Do I want to give them the Europa League, or do I not think they will get the Europa League? I think Lech Poznań should be getting the Europa League this season though. The Polish champions should do it every single year. I will give this to Lech. Not so tight in the New Saints versus Dynamo Kiev. Genk versus Legia Warsaw, that should be Genk's win, but a very tight one. Midtjylland versus Kuopio, that should be Midtjylland's game. Zrinski Mostar versus Maccabi Tel Aviv. That's a tight win for the Bosniaks. Crvena Zvezda versus Anderlecht. That should be yet another Belgian side winning in aggregate. And Ljubljana versus Bucharest. I'm giving this one to Bucharest. They've qualified to the Europa League last season and they're going to do it again. And now it's time for my personal favorite European competition. You might remember I've made a video about why this was actually a perfect idea to start the Conference League. Now it's time to predict what will happen there. When I'm looking at these names, many of them don't really speak much to me aside from where they're from. If I was going to name someone from Seinäjoki, I wouldn't. So I'm going to go with Helsinki winning. Then we've got Ortabasi, Żelieżniczar, I want to say. Seinäjoki, it will go down to the penalty shootout, but they will win. Partizani Tirana, Unic, Kegelman, I want to say. Although Irish League is on the rise, I could see them marketing themselves very well. Decic, Dojust, Tutieska on penalties. Auda, Avertford West County will not go through multi-site. Rabotniczki Skopje will not go through the Belarusian side. Magpies may just knock out Paide. Birir Kara versus Petrocub Cesti. I'm saying this is Petrocub's game. Dudelange, Valur Reykjavik, Vikingur Reykjavik. They were in the Conference League knockouts and they might not go for it again, but they will definitely go past the first round. Dilagori, Daugavpils, I want to say. Urartu, Vardar Skopje, albeit very tight one on penalties, I'd even say. Penibont FC, although I know nothing about them. Cliftonville, Borat Banja Luka, that would be a definite one. And that is it in terms of the first round, so we can instantly jump into the second one. Now we've got a couple pairings that would say more, so I'm saying Dundee United goes through Strassen. Auda versus Pristina. It's Auda's game. And now it's Urartu versus Dunajska Streda. Now the interesting thing about the Slovak side is that they're owned by the same equity that owns the Hungarian side, Giori, ETO FC, and Dunajska Streda is subject to be potentially excluded from this year's competition. As of 26th of June when I'm recording this, it hasn't happened. The UEFA found it out during the draw, by the way. As of now, there's no confirmation of the ban for Dunajska Streda, so we'll go with them included. Same thing about Olympic Lyon in the Europa League, albeit for very different reasons, because if you don't get the license in the top tier, or whatever tier you're in, you shouldn't get the license for UEFA competitions, but we'll see how it is, because there is still an appeal going on after Lyon's famous relegation to Ligue 2. Right now, Lyon will stay in the Europa League, because we don't know how this will finish. Dunajska Streda should go past, although I remember them losing to the Azeri side last year. We'll let them go through, albeit on a 1-goal difference. Then I'm going Swift versus FC Vaduz. That should be Vaduz's game. They should be knocked out by Silkeborg. Banga Garzai should be knocked out by Rosenborg, also quite comfortably. Dudelange versus Dynamo City. That should be a bit tighter, although albeit Dynamo wins. Spiri versus Austria Wien shouldn't be much of a problem for the Austrians. Floriana versus Balkani, much tighter one. I even might say Floriana could win this. Żelieżniczar versus Viking from Norway. Should be Vikings win. Athens versus Levski Sofia. Now that is an interesting pairing as well.
Pause again. AEK's opponents should be Hapoel Beersheva. No change to the result though. The Greek side goes through.
Punic versus Giori ETO FC. That should be Giori's win. Rigas should also get past Dilagori. And now we've got a very interesting pairing from my perspective. Žilina plays Raków Częstochowa from Poland. Žilina, again, they have a usual route of going close to Slovan Bratislava, giving the hope of maybe clinching the title away from them, and then the second half of the season they sell a couple players and they either finish second, way off Slovan Bratislava, or even down to 6th. I even made a video about them having a chance for the title, and they didn't make it, so I want to say, at home, Žilina should get a draw, but away, it will be Rakov. Petrocub versus Sabak FC, and I bet it will be Petrocub winning it. Universitatea Cluj versus Ararat Armenia should be the Romanians. Santa Clara versus Varaždin should be a bit tighter, but I'm giving this to Santa Clara. Penibont versus Valur Reykjavik, and I'm giving this one to Valur. CFR Cluj versus Maribor. I want to say Maribor's win.
Should be Paxi, not Cluj, but Maribor still advances.
Daugavpils losing out to Valur based on the last season. Royal Charleroi versus
not Pushkas but Hammarby. Charleroi wins anyway.
Radnički not getting past Seinäjoki. Novi Sad should be an easy win for Jagiellonia. Żytomyr should lose out to Belgrade Banja Luka. Vardar Skopje should lose out to Lozon Sport. Havnar Bortflag should lose out to Brandby. Alexandria should lose out to Partizan. Spartak Trnava should win over Hibernians. Hegelman should not be getting past Partizani Tirana in my opinion. Solna should be a clear win. Sarajevo should be a penalty shootout. Aris Limassol should get past Pushkas Academia, but it will be very tight. Cliftonville versus Shamrock Rovers, another Irish derby. and I'm giving this one to Shamrock Rovers. Tampere and Ilves might win at home against Alkmaar, but not away. Zira versus Hajduk, bit clearer. Arda Kardzali versus HJK. I'm giving this one to HJK. Oktober versus Sparta Prague. Sparta, knowing their Champions League experience, should go through. Zimbru versus Astana. That is Astana's win as well. Decic should be knocked out by Rapid Wien quite comfortably. Torpedo, Belash, Wojtinho should not win over Maccabi Haifa. Aras, Naxivan shouldn't be winning against PAOK Saloniki. Omonia could be winning against Ordabasy. Chernomore Varna against Istanbul Başakşehir may put up a fight, but that will be it. And Sutieshka versus Beitar Jerusalem should have a clear favorite. Now down to the Champions path. Kairat should go past Interclub de Scaldes, then we've got Shkendia getting past Differdange. Hamrun will lose out to Shelbourne. Levadia should win against Iberia. Budućnost should go into the penalty shootout against Milsami Orhei and lose it. Dynamo Minsk should barely win over Egnatia, I think. And this is how the first two qualifying rounds of the Conference League will go. We are going with the third qualifying round. The draw has not been made yet in real life, and now we've got the first pairing, Raków versus Vikingur Reykjavik. Despite Vikingur Reykjavik causing trouble to Raków, they're giving this one to the Polish side. BK Haken versus Shamrock Rovers. That should be Haken's game, really. Floriana FC versus Partizan Belgrade. I don't see Partizan not going through this opponent. Beitar Jerusalem should also be knocked out by Baník Ostrava. Austria Vienna versus CFR Cluj. Now, I think this might actually go down in penalties. Slevski Sofia versus FK Astana. I'm giving this one to the Kazakh side though. Hibernian versus Helsinki. That should be Hibernian's win, really. Larnaca versus Riga FC. Shouldn't be Riga's, but might be. Partizan Tirana with no chance against Istanbul Başakşehir. Rosenborg Trondheim shouldn't go past Sparta Prague. Sarajevo versus Athens is a win for the Greek side. Aris Limassol versus Santa Clara will be much tighter, and I'm even saying this might be Limassol's win. Solna should also maybe just win over Omonia. Lausanne Sport drawing, then losing to Royal Charleroi. Dunajska Streda shouldn't get past Borac Banja Luka knowing their history, but it will go into the extra time. And I'm actually giving the win to the Slovak side. Uniwersytetia Cluj versus Jagiellonia should be tighter. I think Jagiellonia might just win. Silkeborg versus Rapid Wien, another very interesting pairing. I'm giving this one to Rapid. Dundee United versus Giori should be Dundee's win. Alda shouldn't win against Maccabi. Valur Reykjavik should win against Maribor, although anything can happen with the Icelandic clubs. Spartak Trnava gets past Dynamo City. Brentby gets past Petrocub. Viking versus Hajduk might end up in extra time or even penalties. And I'm giving the win to Hajduk here, considering how close the title fight was between the top three in Croatia. Vaduz versus Alkmaar should be a big of a trouble. Aris versus Sheriff Tiraspol should be tight. And Sejnowiec versus Shakhtar Donetsk should be Shakhtar's win. Now, in the Champions path, we welcome Virtus and we welcome Lincoln Redims, who got a bye to the third qualifying round after losing. Now, Shelbourne should get past Dynamo Minsk. Kairat Almaty should get past Shkendia. Virtus could put up a fight against Lincoln Redims, but that will be it for them. And Levadia should get past Milsami Orhei. So this is how the third qualifying round goes. And now it's time for the final qualifying round of the Conference League. And I can see already a couple of interesting matches. This time we'll start from the Champions path to round up this qualifying. And I think Kairat Almaty will just get past Linfield, break Dublik. They might actually keep it away from home. Vikingur versus Žalgiris. That I think should be Žalgiris' win, but a very tight one. Then we've got Drita versus Levadia. Should be more than comfortable for Levadia, really. And Noach Yerevan versus Shelbourne. And I think in this particular one, Noach might get through. And now we're going to the league path. And I can already see Riga SC is taking on Fiorentina. Now, the Latvian club RFS didn't do that badly in the Europa League stage last season. And I think the pattern is going to repeat here. It will be a confident win for Fiorentina. Then we've got Hibernian versus Maccabi Haifa. And I think this should be Hibernian's win. Baník Ostrava shouldn't be winning against Rayo Vallecano, albeit it will be a tight game. Celje versus Partizan Belgrade. Now, I haven't seen a rule that says this matchup cannot happen. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because in the round 2 of the Europa League qualifiers, we've also had this game. So I'm right now saying it won't be the repeat, really. This is technically not forbidden. And the same thing applies to one other game. Spartak Trnava versus BK Haken. And this time I believe it will be Haken again who gets past the Slovak side. Rapid Wien versus Servette. Now that is a very interesting matchup. And I'm saying it could be anyone's game. And I'm giving this one to the penalty shootout and it will be Rapid Wien. We've got Raków versus Austria Wien. And we know Austria Wien has been defeated by Lech. It has been defeated by Legia. Could it be defeated by Raków as well? Now I'm just saying, it goes to the penalty shootout, and in the penalty shootout, I think Rakov could be more clinical. FK Astana versus Shakhtar Donetsk, that should be Shakhtar's confident win. Aris Saloniki versus Jagiellonia. I'm giving to Aris. Same for Athens against Solna. Dundee United versus Strasbourg. Shouldn't be an easy, but definitely a confident win for the French side. Wolfsberger versus Sparta Prague. Considering how Sparta has performed last season in the Champions League, they got a couple points. They should go through in this particular one. Maribor shouldn't against Başakşehir though. Fredrikstad will be knocked out by Alkmaar, I'm saying this with quite confidence. Same for Hajduk Split against Nottingham Forest, but I do see them winning at home. Royal Charleroi should quite confidently get past Dunajska Streda. Brann versus Mainz, a bit tighter, but I think still Mainz's win. Brøndby versus Lugano, that should be a win for the Swiss side, I think. And Aris Limassol should lose out to Panathinaikos. And this is how we finish the qualifiers. I hope I've not made any mistakes. Now it's time to go to the league stage. I see a couple of very interesting names already. In the Conference League, I'm saying the couple of favorites could be Fiorentina as usual, Nottingham, of course, all of the teams from the top leagues. But outside that, I'm giving a good shout for maybe, just maybe, one of the Austrian sides like Rapid Wien. Legia Warsaw could do it again, Sparta Prague could have a run as well, Panathinaikos. Like, there's a couple of teams that might cause an upset here in the Conference League. Then we're having the Europa League stage list. Of course, the favorites are the teams from the top league. I'm saying Aston Villa, I'm saying Crystal Palace, I'm saying Delta de Vigo maybe. Dinamo Zagreb could do something here. Rangers, because they've gone to the final in 2022. Plenty of possibilities in the Europa League. In the Champions League, of course, it's the usual suspects here to win. Real, Manchester, Bayern, Liverpool, PSG, Inter, Borussia, Barcelona, Arsenal as well. Of course, if I did the league stage, that would take way too much time to even calculate how the league stage should look like. So we're going to do a quick mock table, see who goes to the round of 16, see who goes to the knockouts in general. I'll see you when I'm done with each league stage. So I've roughly completed the league stage of every single competition and should be kind of correct. And you should be able to make a full fixture list out of this, but if I did that, that would take much more time. Here's how it turns out. From upset eliminations in the Conference League stage, we've got Sigma Olomouc, who could be going to the knockouts, but only in the last places pretty much. Also, we've got Athens, Utrecht, Partizan Belgrade is out in favor of teams like Olimpia Ljubljana or Karabakh, who I think, well, are still an established European brand, already played in the Conference League knockouts. I guess it was 2022. The Europa League stage turns out is a bit more interesting. Basically, I've made every single team win at least one game, as I can see. We've got a team like Olympique Lyon nearly at the bottom, actually at the bottom at the 35th place, but you have to remember, they've been relegated to Ligue 1. There will be plenty of exits during the summer transfer window because, well, players want to play in Ligue 1 or something. From older outings, it's Anderlecht who's out, it's Rijeka, Genk, Slovan Bratislava and Midtjylland as well, Lech Poznań, Ferencváros. We'll get two teams from Switzerland in the knockout playoff of the Europa League. We'll get Malmö, Nice, Salzburg. But it's a Italian 1-2 at the top. And what about the Champions League stage? It's the usual, really. The teams from outside the top 7 or 8 leagues are out at the first time of asking in the league stage with little to no points. Newcastle, Monaco, Marseille are all out, although it's pretty unpredictable. They can also get ahead of Bruges, Eindhoven and Ajax, but it will be tight. Tottenham is barely qualifying, and I think they might even not qualify at all, but I've given them the chance just because they've won the Europa League. They can show up to the big game still. They've got the new coach, Thomas Frank from Brentford. Overall, I would say from the top 7 leagues, which is something I'm mostly interested in when it comes to the Champions League knockout stages, it's only Club Brugge. But I'm not willing to really eliminate and cross out Galatasaray, Copenhagen, Slavia Prague, Celtic, Olympiacos, maybe Royal Union Saint-Gilloise. I say the top 17, 18, I want to say, is pretty much certain of going to the knockouts if no questions asked. Now we'll be going to the knockout stages, and I've already made the draw. And to make things easier, I just copied the ladders from last year's European tournaments via league stage positions. So in the Conference League, for example, the draw results are identical to those from the last season. I of course did not remember to complete it in the quarter and semi-finals, assuming it's just anyone versus anyone at that point. So there'll be a correction later on. And now it's time for the knockout stages themselves. It's pretty much the case of who you will draw, and this will be the main factor deciding how far will you go. We're starting from the knockout playoffs, and we're starting with Panathinaikos taking on Olimpia Ljubljana. Now, Olimpia didn't get past the Bosniak side Borac Banja Luka. Panathinaikos was in the round of 16 of the Conference League. but they had trouble getting past Vikingur Reykjavik from Iceland. I'd say it's 2 wins for Panathinaikos, both home and away. Now we've got Raków, Częstochowa and Shakhtar Donetsk. Now we remember Shakhtar Donetsk still can go to the Champions League and stuff. So I'm going to give this one with a draw for Raków to Shakhtar still. Then we've got Hakel versus Royal Charleroi. Belgian win for me. Samsunspor versus Lugano would be an extra time, and that's what I'm saying. Even the penalty shootout, which I'm giving to Lugano right now, they'll be looking for that redemption in the penalty shootout, and I think they should get it. Next up, we've got Maccabi versus Legia Warsaw, and I'm still saying it's Legia's win, clearly. Crvena Zvezda versus Aberdeen should be Aberdeen's win. Istanbul Başakşehir should get past Karabakh, and Hibernian versus Aris Saloniki to be a tight Saloniki's win. To the round of 16, Panathinaikos versus Nottingham Forest. Now we know weaker sides can go against the stronger sides. Best examples are from Poland last year. Jagiellonia got a draw against Real Betis in the quarters. Legia even won a game against Chelsea. I think it should be clear here though. It's Panathinaikos who get knocked out by Nottingham Forest. Shakhtar Donetsk versus Rapid Wien, and this time I'm actually giving this to the Austrian side. Royal Charleroi versus Sparta Prague. Sparta Prague just hired back Brian Priske, and he might be the factor that gets Sparta Prague past Royal Charleroi. Again, I'm giving this in the penalty shootout. Lugano versus Vallecano. Now Vallecano, they played once in Europe, and this might bite them. A win and a draw for Lugano. Legia versus Strasbourg. Strasbourg having the youngest 11 in the European top 5 leagues last season, or something very close to that. Legia also has a new coach, and his name is Edward Iordanescu. Iordanescu won the Romanian league with Cluj, being a coach of the Romanian national team. They might win a single game at home, but away they will be verified by Strasbourg, and it should be the French side going through. Aberdeen versus Mainz, wouldn't be so confident. Başakşehir versus Alkmaar. Alkmaar should be getting past the Turkish side. And Aris Saloniki versus Fiorentina, who were in the semi-final last season. In 2 previous years, they were in the final, and they should be going on a run like this again. And now we're in the quarterfinals. A team from outside the top 7 leagues will definitely be in the semi-final, which is quite a huge deal for those leagues outside the top. But first, Nottingham Forest versus Rapid Wien. And I'm thinking this despite the fact that Nottingham in the early stages might rotate the squad because Premier League might be their priority. I still think they should win. Now it's Sparta Prague versus Lugano. Sparta's win, and they're going to the semis. Strasbourg versus FSV Mainz. I think this is Strasbourg's win pretty much. And also Fiorentina wins over AZ Alkmaar, albeit I think it will be a draw in one of those games. Now I've got Nottingham versus Sparta Prague, and it's not the time for Nottingham to rotate. And this is why I believe they should be winning over Sparta quite clearly. And what about Strasbourg versus Fiorentina? I think Fiorentina's run ends here, to be honest. And I'm giving 2 tight wins for RC Strasbourg. And now it's time for the final in RB Arena in Leipzig. And here's a bit of an unpopular opinion. Strasbourg's 11 may be young. Nottingham is of course the Premier League side, and the Premier League side Chelsea absolutely battered Betis in the most recent final. Now this time, I actually want to give it to Strasbourg with a 2-0 win. And this is how I think the Conference League will finish this season. Strasbourg wins over Nottingham, and this is how this tournament will finish. Now we're going to the Europa League, and we're again in the knockout playoffs. Couple of very interesting teams here. It's Braga versus Celta de Vigo. It could be Braga winning it. Then we've got Dinamo Zagreb versus Crystal Palace, and I'm giving this win to the Eagles. Basel versus Betis. That should be the usual tale of Betis going through. Nice should be getting past Malmö. Go ahead, Eagles versus Pozzo. They were in the Europa League knockout phase and lost to Roma. I still think they should be winning against Go ahead, Eagles. Besiktas versus Salzburg, and I'm giving this one to the Austrian side. Young Bern versus Fenerbahce should be Fenerbahce's window. And Victoria Pilsen with PAOK Saloniki. They both were in the knockouts last year. Victoria won over Ferencvaros, PAOK lost out to FCSB, and I want to say it will be tight, but I'm giving this one to Victoria on penalties. Braga versus Freiburg in the round of 16. This is how we start. Now Braga could be getting past the Germans here. Crystal Palace should be getting past Rangers. Real Betis should go ahead of Lost Kiel. Now Roma, considering how far up they are in the coefficient rankings, I think they could be one of the favorites to win the whole thing, but I'm giving this one to Roma. Porto versus Feyenoord, Champions League experience. I think Feyenoord should be the favorites. Same as Bologna should be the favorites against Salzburg, albeit it will be a very tight game. And Fenerbahce versus Stuttgart, I'm giving this one to the extra time, and Fenerbahce wins there. Victoria Pilsen versus Aston Villa. Now, it shouldn't be too much of a discussion considering Aston Villa's quarter-final run last year. Now going to the quarterfinals, we're starting off with SC Braga taking on Crystal Palace. And I think basically Crystal Palace is a Premier League side, so
shouldn't be a big problem for them. Now we've got Real Betis, the finalists of the Conference League, and AS Roma. This time around, I'm thinking it could be Roma's win. Feyenoord versus Bologna. Now, Feyenoord wasn't the Champions League knockouts, even in the round of 16. Bologna wasn't. They didn't even get past the league stage. And I think this could be the deciding factor here, but it will be even down to penalties, I believe. And Fenerbahce versus Aston Villa. Of course, Aston Villa, we remember how last season they got to the Champions League quarterfinals, and I think this will be confirmed in the Europa League quarters. Moving into the semi-final, and Crystal Palace, I want to say they're playing in Europe for the very first time, and I think this will be the factor in the game against AS Roma. Therefore, I'm saying AS Roma, after a tight game, will go to the Europa League final in Istanbul, but Feyenoord shouldn't be getting past Aston Villa, so we have a Roma versus Villa Europa League final, and I think this one goes to the team from Birmingham with a 3-1 result, I believe. So this is how the Europa League rounds up. And now we're about to finish it with the Champions League. It's Athletic Bilbao versus Napoli in the first knockout playoff. Napoli, after winning the Scudetto 1 point over Inter Milan, they should be getting past Bilbao. Bruges versus Benfica. Now I give this to Benfica still. Sporting should be winning against Atleti. Ajax should be winning against Juventus. Bayer Leverkusen versus Atalanta should go to the penalty shootout. Eindhoven versus PSG. Knowing how good the PSG 11 is, they should be winning it quite comfortably. Tottenham, I don't think they'll win against Frankfurt. And Villarreal versus Liverpool. Liverpool, the Premier League champions, going past quite easily. And now we've got the round of 16. Napoli versus Madrid. Madrid still not so certain, really. Benfica versus Bayern could be tighter, and I think Bayern will just win it. Atletico Madrid versus Barcelona. I'm already going to say it. Barcelona are one of my favorites, and also PSG and Manchester City to win the whole thing. Juventus should be maybe losing out to Borussia Dortmund. Bayern versus Arsenal should be Arsenal's win. Paris Saint-Germain should be winning against Chelsea, albeit just. Milan should be winning against Eintracht Frankfurt. And now here's my unpopular opinion. In this situation, Liverpool is going to be just knocked out by Manchester City. Like, it even could go down to the penalty shootout. But yeah, Manchester City is going through. And we're now in the quarterfinal, starting off with Real Madrid versus Bayern Munich. Most recently, I believe they played in 23-24 season in the semi-final. And in that tie, Real Madrid, with the help of Joselu, the striker, made a comeback. This time around, I don't think it will be as dramatic. I'm still giving it to Real Madrid though. Barcelona versus Juventus. I think Barcelona only getting better and better. Should be getting past the old lady. Arsenal versus Paris Saint-Germain. Potential revenge for a semi-final from last season. And I'm actually saying this one will not happen, albeit it will be very close. It could go either way. And Inter Milan versus Manchester City. A potential revenge for the 2023 final. I'm saying it actually goes to penalty shootout, and there wins. I just want to say Manchester City. I'm feeling they could go far in this season's competition. In the semi-final, we've got the El Clasico, and knowing how Barcelona won the league last season and was in the Champions League semi-final, very, very close from reaching the final itself. This time it will be again Barcelona's win, and in the other semi-final between PSG and Manchester City, I'm actually saying this is PSG's very tight win again. And now we're in the final. Barcelona plays Paris Saint-Germain. This is the final we could have had last season, but Acerbi and Fratesi had different plans. And I'm saying this one in particular goes to the penalty shootout. And I think Barcelona will win Champions League itself this season. But we're not done here just yet. We still have the coefficient rankings to make. Only the national coefficient rankings. So this table is not incorrect, despite the fact that, for example, the club ranking, as far as I'm aware, knockout playoff matches do not add any points to each club, and there's guaranteed points for each club for reaching a certain round in the conference qualifiers, for example. And this is how the coefficient rankings look like after this season. Are there any notable changes here? Maybe Norway dropping down after only Bodo Glimt did well. Other than that, I don't really see any major changes. Maybe Ukraine, who did well with Dynamo Kiev and Shakhtar Donetsk, both reaching European League stages. Nothing crazy going on here. And I want to thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed these predictions, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. I'll be very grateful for that. You can also leave your opinion and your own predictions in the comments down below. We'll see how this Champions League, Europa League and Conference League season will turn out. I think this is round about what's going to happen this season. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.